and welcome to today's episode of LinkedIn with Louise. And today I have a really interesting guest who's going to talk to us all about the age of influence. And my guest is called Neal Schaffer, and he's joining me so it's about 4 o'clock here in the UK, and for Neal, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. So Neal, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Louise. I'm excited to be here.
I know, I'm really excited. I was saying to you before we started recording, I have so many questions written down for you, so you're going to get a bit bombarded.
I love it. Let's do it.
So Neal, before we dive in, can you just introduce yourself briefly and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your business and who you work with?
Sure. So I am a digital marketing author, speaker, consultant. I actually teach executives at a few universities, including the Irish Management Institute, which, Louise, we started our conversation on. I started my career more than a decade ago, really on LinkedIn. So I wrote 2 books on LinkedIn very early on, back in 2009 and 2011, believe it or not. Since then, I've moved on. My 3rd book was called Maximize Your Social, which was all about creating a social media strategy, measuring social media ROI. And more recently, I have written a book called The Age of Influence, which actually published this year in 2020. And is all about influencer marketing. So I work with businesses in a variety of ways. I'd say post-COVID-19, a lot of the work I do is what would be called a fractional CMO or outsourced CMO of jumping into organizations as a marketing consultant, but also as a quasi-employee, and really working hand in hand with employees to strategize, implement, optimize, train, what have you. So they're generally longer term contracts, meeting regularly. And it's funny because you'd think that I have to physically be in offices to do this, but I've just signed on client after client after COVID-19 where we do all this virtually. So I don't know about you, Louise, but I've never been busier. And life is different, but business wise, it's been really good.
Yes, I'm in exactly the same boat because I was contacted by a local government employee asking, would I like to go on the telephone and talk to, the local government support for businesses in COVID-19? And I replied to him and I said, thanks so much. I said, but actually my business is booming because, you and I, Neal, are probably in the same boat in that we are so used to working with people online that's, where everyone else is kind of catching up a little bit.
Yeah. And it's funny. I look at, and I know we're going to talk a lot today, but I look at this COVID-19 as just this whole digital transformation that's been going on for decades. Companies are finally, they have to play catch up because it's the only way to reach their customer, right? Yeah. But also, there aren't that many people. And when we talk about influence and influencers, it's going to be a similar conversation. There aren't that many people that can do what we do. Now, in our circle, we know tons of, Neal Schaffers and Louise Rogans, but in the grand scope of the world, there just aren't that many people out there. So there's definitely great demand for anybody listening that is entrenched in digital and social like we are.
Yes, excellent. Absolutely. So Neal, so are you telling me this is your 4th book?
It is my 4th book. It's really interesting because I really took podcasting, like Louise, we've never met, right? But anybody who listens to the podcasts, especially regarding LinkedIn, you have an amazing brand, amazing reputation. And I come at podcasting as a newcomer, right? I've had a podcast since 2013, believe it or not, but I haven't really, I took some time off and I haven't really gotten into it until Q4 of 2019. So as I was listening to more and more podcasts, I think I first heard of where you were on Teresa Heath Waring's. You were either on Teresa Heath Waring's podcast or Content 10X. It was one of those where I heard the interview with you.
Content 10X with Amy
Content
Woods.
10X. Yes. And she recently had me interviewing as well. And just, hearing you and learning more about you. And it's interesting how we're influenced by different people, right? There's some people that know me as a LinkedIn expert, even though I haven't written a book on LinkedIn in 9 years. There are other people who might follow you, who might have never heard of me. Yes. And that's how we're all, with the democratization of media and of influence, we're all sort of creating our own tribes. And those tribes can be in the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people. And this is really the heart of what influencer marketing looks like today.
Oh my goodness, yes. So this is one I've written down so many different questions. So one of the things I wrote down was about, I wrote down micro influencers. And I think that, when someone thinks about influencers, and I think locally in Northern Ireland anyway, someone thinks, an influencer is like somebody who's on Instagram saying
Mm-hmm.
this is an amazing product, you should buy it. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not really how it goes so much deeper than that. And you talk about this in your book. But what I call a micro influencer is somebody who may have, a few thousand followers, but those followers will pretty much take your word on whatever it is you're talking about. So do you see more, do you see both things, Neal? Do you see the big power hitting influencers, and then you see the smaller people, but with a really loyal following?
Yeah. So, I write about it in The Age of Influence, but what we know about influencer marketing has been spoon-fed to us by the media and by the influencer marketing industry, right? The term micro-influencer came from this industry that is just pushing people on Instagram and now TikTok and YouTube because that's where the money is, right? Okay. So they began saying, well, the more followers, the better. Yeah. But the people with a lot of followers, are they real? Is the engagement authentic? And also they became really, really expensive over time. So it was about 4 years ago where they started talking about the concept of a micro-influencer. But their definition of a micro-influencer is to have at least 10,000 followers. So there's nothing micro about that from our perspective, right? And then 2 years ago, I'd say, and as I was writing the book, they began to talk about nano-influencers. So even micro-influencers priced themselves out of the market. Yeah. And now, well, maybe you should consider working with people between 1 to 10,000 followers, because even though the community is smaller, they're more engaged, more authentic. I think from my perspective, there's less of a chance that they bought fake followers to play the game. And there's less of a chance that, they're buying fake engagement through pods or what have you. So when you look at it that way, Louise, that to me was the turning point. Because if someone, even in that industry that's very Instagram centric, says if you have 1,000 followers, you have some digital influence in the grand scheme of things. I say, instead of looking just at Instagram, let's look at every social network. Yeah. And let's look at that 1,000 follower threshold. How many of you have 1,000 connections on LinkedIn? Because if you have 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, chances are when you publish something, you're going to get 100 impressions. You might get 200 impressions, right? Yeah. And the funny thing is, in parallel, brands and companies just do not perform that well on social media. So you could have someone with 1,000 connections outperforming a company page with a few thousand followers because of that. And that's where you begin to sort of look at influence. There's just more and more nano influencers, and the challenges for businesses in leveraging organic social media are just greater and greater. And I know, Louise, you're absolutely right. The conversations use the Instagram, but I say it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn. I've worked with brands with influencer campaigns on LinkedIn, right? Hashtag ad LinkedIn, hashtag sponsored. So, my writing the book is really to reset people's minds, because I do believe that marketers and entrepreneurs and business owners, we've all been misled. And the concept of influence has been around for a while. And every business listening to this, in my background, Louise, before all this was B2B sales, we all have what we call centers of influence or spheres of influence. We tap into influence in the offline world. We just have not been doing it in the online world. And I think once you read The Age of Influence, and hopefully at the end of this podcast, without reading The Age of Influence, you'll better be able to translate those offline skills into engaging with influencers and influence into the online world, specifically LinkedIn.
One of the things that I loved that I read in your book was about Josiah Wedgwood.
Yes. He was doing influencer marketing back in the day.
Yes, like in the 1700s. Did he present China to, I don't even know what queen it was.
I forgot the name of the queen either, but yeah, it went viral from the queen using, his plates. So that's...
Yeah. So I love that, because I think people need to kind of reset in their head what they actually see as an influencer.
Yeah, exactly. That's really the mission of the book. And yes, this has been going on. We can go back to, radio ads and newspaper ads and TV ads. But, the analogy I like to give is, when I was growing up, like in high school, Top Gun was the big movie.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So one day my friend, comes to school in a motorcycle wearing a leather jacket trying to emulate Tom Cruise, right? And a lot of the girls in my class were trying to emulate Madonna with their clothing, right? Back in the day.
And the lacy hand gloves.
Yes, exactly. So, I'm an 80s child, I know. So it sounds like you are too, which is awesome. But But here's the thing, what influenced our generation, like Gen X, and above that are more like the traditional celebrities, movie, TV, music, and to some extent sports. But over time, what's happened, I mean, if you have kids, look at who influences them. They're TikTok, YouTube, Instagram people that you've probably never heard of.
Yeah.
But they are, my daughter tries to emulate Charlie D'Amala's dances on TikTok, right? So we're seeing the complete democratization of influence. And in between those celebrities and these people that you've never heard of on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, there's a whole other bunch of people that are influencers, authors, speakers, bloggers, people that we meet on LinkedIn or another social network. And before, all the information that we used to religiously read newspapers and magazines, and some of us were still doing that, but that isn't the only source of information now, right? We're finding information everywhere, and we're looking for information, whether it's Google or we're searching Apple Podcasts or we're doing a search on LinkedIn or we're tapping into a LinkedIn group, whatever it might be. We're being influenced by so many other people and entities today than ever before. And if you flip that around, it gives you as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, the ability to influence others as well. So if you re-engineered, or I should say reverse engineered the age of influence, there is a formula that you too can use to build more influence and really influence others in social media.
So if you're listening to this, so someone's listening to this, Neal, and they have a small business, say they've got 10, 15 employees, and they're thinking, well, I want to know more about this. How can this help my business? Let's think of a product based business. So, okay, my friend Anne is based in El Paso in Texas, and she sells...
Yeehaw!
Yeah, she sells like really amazing salsas and all the stuff that's to do with El Paso, right? Mainly food products. So, and Anne, shout out to you. I'm going to tag you in the post when this goes out live, so you're going to listen in. So Anne has corporate gift baskets. So she wants to contact people in larger companies and say, why not send your employees our corporate gift baskets full of all this El Paso style food, like guacamole, salsa, nachos, all that stuff. So where would she start in terms of looking for somebody to work with as an influencer for her brand?
So that's a really niche B2B product right there, right?
Yeah.
So the buyer of her product are limited to people in corporate. And I don't even know what the title of those people would be. I don't know if it's HR. I don't know if she could possibly sell to marketing, but I think it really begins with, obviously, who are those people, because this is a sale, but who are those people following? What media do those people read?
Yeah.
Who might they be following on social media as a start? Whose blogs might they be reading? Whose podcasts might they be listening to? Yeah. And I would always start, if I was working with a client, we would start with a search. If I wanted to find out, if I wanted to be influenced by people talking about corporate gift baskets, or I wanted to find out more about corporate gift baskets, where would I go? I would probably start to do searches. When I do searches for those things, in Google, but also in social media, who are the people that come up, right? And the problem is that is a really, really niche market where there may not be that many people talking about it. Yes. I don't know if there's a blog that's just focused on corporate gift baskets, right?
Yeah. Could it be like, there's a national convention on corporate gift baskets. She's just spoke at it.
Beautiful. So if she's speaking at a national conference, she herself is an influencer. So if there's a national conference, who are the other speakers, right?
Yes.
And probably, in this instance, it might be that the influencers are other companies that are, maybe it's the company that actually produces the basket, right? Or it's the company that produces the chips that would go together with her salsa.
Yes. Who would talk about her brand.
Exactly. So it's the partner. So sometimes the influencers aren't people, they're companies, right?
Right.
But the whole idea is that who has influence digitally? So offline influence marketing, you're always doing that in sales and marketing in general. But in the digital world, who of those people has a big audience, is talking a lot about this subject? And that is where, for anybody that works in a very, very niche B2B industry, that is where you start. And if you have an annual conference, if you have a professional association, that is where you start to dig into who are the people that seem to have influence.
Yes.
And really go from there.
So I know that it's like the podcasting conferences that are held mainly in America. So, for example, if I wanted to get onto more podcasts, I would be going to those conferences and literally going out and talking to the people that I saw as kind of the gatekeepers to that world, do you think? Or what would you say?
So Louise, so I mentioned I have my own podcast, right? It's called Maximize Your Social Influence Podcast.
Yes.
And literally today, literally 4.5 hours ago, I published a new episode, which is why I invested time to appear in 100 different podcasts as a guest. So actually, this is a really interesting topic. And there's an analogy here with general influencer marketing, which is you have these agencies, you have these people that say, oh, you want to get hooked up with influencers, we can help you do that. Pay us money.
Yeah.
And there's the other part that I teach you in the book, which is you can directly reach out to people, right?
Yes.
So the same as in podcasting. There are podcasting agencies. We'll get you as a guest on shows. I didn't use any of that. I reached out directly. Yes. But here's the thing, Louise, and I write about this in a later chapter in my book. The more influence you have, the more successful you're going to be when you reach out to people. So I also have a podcast. And for a lot of other podcasters, they want to appear on more podcasts as well.
Yes.
And the more influential my podcast is, the more excited they are to want to work with me and want to interview me on their podcast, right?
Yes.
So that's part of it. The other part of it is really the personalized outreach. I had a gentleman, I'm sure, Louise, you get tons of people who want to be on your podcast. Yeah. I had a gentleman, he wanted to be on my podcast and he pitched me, but it was really more for an entrepreneur's podcast, not for mine, which focuses more on digital and social media marketing. And I let him know and he goes, sorry, my staff, we're reaching out to a bunch of podcasts. And the idea is that, my methodology, and it's probably going to be similar with you, Louise, is I was looking at top podcast lists in terms of popularity on Apple and stuff, looking in the marketing genre, but realizing that not all of these podcasts were appropriate for me. And that's completely fine. If I was to look at the podcast episodes and if they were to talk about influencer marketing, would it be natural or not? Would it be aligned with that show or not? Or do they even do interviews? Because some podcasts don't do interviews at all.
Yeah.
So there you get a sense. And it's the exact same with businesses. If you wanted to work with an influencer and you hope they talk about you, would it be natural? If it
yes, is it a fit?
Is it a fit? I mean, I've had if you look at my profile photo here on Zoom, my profile photo, I'm wearing a black suit with a nice Brooks Brothers, navy blue, dress shirt. So I've had a custom suit company reach out to me. We'd love for you to talk about us on social media. We'll send you a free suit. But I don't talk about men's fashion. I'm not a men's fashion influencer, right? And it's just it's a great example of things that you need to be on the watch for. But Louise, absolutely. If you were to go, and I went to PodFest, which is the lesser known of the two major, I think podcast movement is the big one. I went to PodFest for the first time in March of this year, just before lockdown, right after Social Media Marketing World. And yes, I mean, absolutely. You meet people there and that gives you the ability, because it's all about relationships. We're human beings, right?
Yes.
So if you have a chance to meet someone and you jive, then obviously, you could invest time in going to that, in going to that with that objective of, I want to appear as a guest on more influential podcasts, and it might improve your chances of doing that. Or you can, without doing that, try to befriend, support, build rapport with the person digitally, which we sort of have to do with COVID-19, and try to influence that process. And Louise, this process for being on guest podcasts is the exact same process if you want to appear on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on a blog, or anywhere. It's the same thing. And once people realize that, you realize that podcasters are some of the greatest influencer marketers, because there are so many podcasts that are just focused on interviews with influencers, right? They're always trying to get influencers on their show because they know it's going to help their branding, and maybe that influencer will help promote the show and reach a greater audience. That is influencer marketing right there. And podcasters don't even realize it. And you're trying to tap in by being a guest in other shows, you're trying to tap into the same thing from the flip side. So this is just a great example of how all this works.
Well, I'll give you an example today of somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn, and we're new connections. He sent me a connection request, and he said he works with employee advocacy for a large firm in the UK. And he says, I really love your podcast. I'm getting a lot from it, da, 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 da. And I replied and I said, oh, thank you so much. Because no matter how many listeners you have, very few of them actually reach out and say, I listen and thanks and I like your podcast.
Agree. Yeah. It's sort of a lonely world in podcasting, isn't it?
Yes.
You see the number, you're getting tons of downloads, but yeah, I hear you.
Is anyone listening? And he said, so I replied and I said, oh, thank you so much. I was genuinely flattered. And then he said, actually, would this be a great topic for your podcast? Now, if he had come straight out and said, I'd like to come on your podcast, blah, blah, blah. I'd have gone, well, I don't know who you are. But we've had a conversation about, the podcast. I know he's a listener from the things he said. And actually, I think his topic would be a great fit for my podcast. So it's just, it's interesting how, and it's a good fit as well. It's not like he's reached out to me and said, so somebody else said they'd like to come on the podcast, but they wanted to talk about issues that are not appropriate for my audience. So I had to politely say, look, it's not really a great fit. So I think when you're pitching, because there's two things here, Neal, isn't there? There's looking for influencers, and then there's the people who want to become influencers as well.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about brands looking for an influencer. What do you say to somebody who says that they want to become an influencer?
Yeah. And that's really what got me to write the book, because, it was back in 2018 when the questions, whenever I spoke and with clients, started to focus more and more, not just around influencer marketing, but how can some of these people become influencers themselves, right? They have friends that are getting paid $500 to post on Instagram and all this stuff. Yeah. So it is, and that's why in the book I include a chapter on how to become an influencer, knowing that a lot of marketers and entrepreneurs and business owners reading that would want to try to become a little bit more influential. So, it's funny. I was just on a webinar yesterday with my friends at Agora Pulse, and my topic was how to convert your employees into becoming LinkedIn influencers. So there's this whole employee advocacy, social selling side to this that we could talk about. But really, when we think of an influencer, right, it's someone that is publishing content online and has built a community. So publishing content, what does that mean? Well, they could be a blogger, or they could just be regularly publishing status updates on LinkedIn. Now, there's a rule that I talk about in the book called the 99-1 rule. And this is a concept that was developed maybe 15 years ago, before social media. But the idea was that on the internet, 90% of internet users are lurkers. 9% actually engage with content, i.e., comment and nowadays share. Yeah. And then only 1% are content creators. And I think it's a really, really good analogy to look at. LinkedIn probably has 700 million users now, right? Yeah. How many people on a daily basis are actually publishing content? It's probably close to that 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 3%. So that's only, say, 20 million people. That's it's a lot of people, but on the other hand, it's the top 1, 2, 3%. So if there are employees of yours, customers, or people in your niche that you want to influence that are regularly publishing, and they've built up a base of connections and followers that's over 1,000, which they probably have because they've been consistent with that, they are sort of the nano influencers on LinkedIn. And therefore, if you want to become that, it really comes with that consistency and having a subject matter, right? If you're all over the place, it doesn't really build influence. Yes. It's when you have a subject matter that you're an expert at, you're passionate about, maybe you do business in, and it's that consistent publishing, the consistent also engaging, and not just when people comment on your post, but actually reaching out and engaging with other people, engaging on your feed, doing searches on LinkedIn for other posts that you can engage on as well, to sort of build up your authority in the space and to expose yourself to other people. This is the exact same thing you would do it on Instagram, right? Or on Twitter or on any other social network. So it's the same thing. And I know it sounds really easy. It's actually not easy, and it's very time consuming. Yeah. But if I'm in El Paso and I do corporate gift boxes, but I'm really trying to sell the Tex-Mex lifestyle or Tex-Mex food, which I'm assuming that your friend is doing, that's what I'd want to be talking about, right? Yeah. And through that, becoming known as sort of that person, and in an influential social network like LinkedIn, you just never know the types of people that might end up connecting with you or seeing that content and saying, a friend of mine was looking for, unique foods for their corporate gift, or maybe we need more diversity in our organization. We need more diversity in our food box. I don't know, right? We never know what makes people tick, but that's really
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what really gets you on people's radar, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so I have I'm part of a peer-to-peer mastermind here in the UK, and my friends in the mastermind said that basically the content that I share on LinkedIn, I know people have connected with me and follow me because I talk to them about how to use LinkedIn, and I get really good engagement on my posts. And my friend said, "Oh, I talked about something like completely random, and got so many views, and that was excellent." And I thought, well, there's no point in me doing that. People don't care what I say about the housing market or a new chocolate bar. And yeah, I might get lots of people commenting on it, but it's not going to increase me as a person who knows about LinkedIn, is it? So I think, yeah, exactly. The way you described that, Neal, is exactly how I work with people on LinkedIn.
Some people sort of think engagement equals influence, but that's not the case. So every once in a while, Louise, you see these pretty stupid posts on LinkedIn. My boss thinks that no one engages on LinkedIn. I want to prove him wrong. Please like this post and send him a message. Right? I mean, really? So that post, okay, if you dupe the algorithm, right, that post may get a lot of engagement. I don't remember the name of the guy who wrote the post, right? No. And it's not about a subject that I'm interested in. But on the flip side, if you have a lot of influence, you need to yield that influence, right? If you have a lot of influence and you stop publishing or your content gets less and less engagement, you need to do something to build that up. So that as a tactic to help remind your audience that you're there by reaching more people in the algorithm, that might be of interest, right? And those people resonate with you because they know you. Whereas this random Joe was reaching all these new people, but I doubt that he got a lot. I doubt he got much out of it other than just getting a lot of likes on the post. Yeah. So that's a mistake that I hope those listeners don't make. It has to be relevant content, relevant audience, relevant engagement.
Definitely. I mean, one of the phrases I lifted from your book as well, you were talking about the everyday expert. This is early on in the chapters, or the mommy blogger. So I've 3 kids. I'm married. I've got 3 kids at home. They're 10, 12, and 14. And we like to cook and bake and stuff. And when you go to Google and you look for recipes, it's all these mommy bloggers. And it's fascinating to me how they work, because they're sharing a recipe, but they're like selling a crock pot.
Yeah. And what's really funny, Louise, I mean, I talk about this in the book. So I have a blog, nealschaffer.com. It used to be called Maximize Social Business. And I've always had a lot of guest bloggers. I used to have someone who guest blog in something called Blogger Outreach, but that is influencer marketing. They were, before Instagram, it was mommy bloggers. They were the hot thing that all the brands wanted to reach out to. And they're still, especially when you think about like cooking or just entire social networks like Pinterest.
Yes.
They have a tremendous amount of influence. Now, some of them have translated that to Instagram, right? So, where do you want to build your influence? You can build great influence on Instagram. It doesn't mean you're going to get a lot of web traffic, because that's not how Instagram works. So others have just stuck to their blogs and have done really well, or may have just used Pinterest as their main network. So there's no one way to do it. There's many different ways, but it really depends on, your objective. Where's your audience? And many times, Louise, when we talk about someone who wants to become an influencer, what are the networks that you use, that you like to use? And what are the content mediums you feel comfortable with? Because if you enjoy doing videos, you're going to want to become a YouTuber. Yeah. And you can use those videos throughout social media. If speaking is your thing, you'll want to become a podcaster, right?
Yes.
If you love to write, you're going to want to become a blogger. So there are things that, because you have to have the passion for it. If not, you're going to stop. How many podcasts stop after like 5 or 10 episodes? The stats are incredible, right?
Yes, I remember that. I know you've been on Johnny Dumas's EO Fire podcast. And I interviewed him on my podcast, about a year and a half ago, I think. And he said something like the statistics around people who give up before episode 10 is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. You can't do it. And, I was really honest with my podcast listeners. I started my podcast as sort of a content marketing initiative, right? Oh, I need to have a podcast. This is back in 2013 before the day. And I stopped doing it for like a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only until, like I said, about 9 months ago where it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because I wasn't a listener of podcasts myself. Right. And so I created a podcast episode. If you really want to influence a community, you got to become a member of the community. You got to know their speak. You got to know what their expectations are. And I have been doing podcasting wrong for like 6 years, embarrassingly enough, right? I didn't, because I wasn't a consumer. And that's really the big thing for anyone here. If you want to become more influential on LinkedIn, or maybe you don't want to become an influencer on LinkedIn, but if you want to do better, if you want to write more engaging status updates or write a more engaging LinkedIn profile summary or headline, there's nothing better than getting in there and looking at 100 different headlines, looking at what are some of the posts in your network, what are the things that you seem to think are more engaging than others, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing better than doing that, in all honesty.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Neal, I'm going to wrap it up because I think, honestly, I could talk to you for like a couple of hours and then everyone will be going, Louise, your podcast normally isn't this long.
We need to deliver value. And sometimes, yes, I totally get that. But we'll save the rest of the conversation for a pint in Belfast once all this coronavirus.
Oh, we definitely will. And you're going to join me live on LinkedIn on Friday, Neal. And I can't wait to talk to our network live on LinkedIn and dive further into this. That'd be really awesome.
So everybody should save their questions until then.
Yes. Tell everybody where they can get hold of the Age of Influence, please.
Sure. So the Age of Influence is available pretty much everywhere. It was published with HarperCollins Leadership. So HarperCollins publishes Gary Vaynerchuk's books and stuff. So I'm sure you'll be able to find it. I have some friends in UK and Ireland that found it. I'm Neal Schaffer, Neal Schaffer, everywhere on LinkedIn, obviously, on the web. Feel free to connect with me there. And I do have that podcast called the Maximize Your Social Influence podcast if you're interested in delving deeper into what we've been talking about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Neal. It's been an absolute joy interviewing you today. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Louise. And I hope I was able to answer some of your questions. Something tells me we didn't get to many of your questions today, did we?
Well, I was like, we were covering things and I was like scribbling, putting lines through things. We've covered that.
Okay, good. Good to hear. Well, thank you so much again. It's really an honor to be here. Excellent.
Thank you. So that was really fun chatting to Neal. What a nice guy. And he comes over and talks at the Irish Management Institute in Dublin. So we definitely will have to get together for a pint, Neal, next time we are able to do that in person. So what do you think, guys? Influencing on LinkedIn. I mean, understanding what it is that you want to become known for and really sticking pretty much to sharing that on your social media is going to help you really grow your sphere of influence and help elevate you. And Elevate being the LinkedIn platform that they use for companies to highlight their employees. We're going to talk more about that in a couple of episodes' time, so do remind me. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I would love to hear from you. If you could leave me a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing. And then I could read your name out on air. That would be super. And if you want to hop over to socialbni.com/free-training and sign up for my next free masterclass on how to use LinkedIn to help you win business online. And I'll talk to you on the podcast next week. Oh, and remember, come and join Neal and I on LinkedIn at 5 p.m. UK time on Friday, which would be 9 a.m. Pacific. All right, guys. See you then. Thank you.